What is up, Heat Seekers? Happy draft day. It's finally upon us. We've made it. We've survived. We've heard all the smoke screen and rumors, but we're here to have a good time. We're here to talk football. We're here to talk about the draft. And we got Rick live in KC with all the good news and notes that hopefully we will get to hear from him. How are you guys? Thomas, it's finally good to stream with you, my friend. But first, we got to start with Rick. He's live there in KC. How are you, Rick? How's it going? What's going on there? What's the vibe there in KC?
Good. We haven't been downtown yet, but we're going to be going down there after the stream today. There's a card show here at the casino that I'm at, and everybody's hype. Everybody's ready. Everybody's wondering who is my team going to pick. And I think this year is unlike any year that I remember being heavy into the draft, where I don't think we really know shit that's going to happen. Like, I think there's so many teams, so many picks, so many players that can go anywhere at any time. Who's going to fall? Who's going to rise up and be the surprise pick? You know, there's one every year. And this year, it's harder to guess. I just, a buddy of mine just tweeted at me last night and asked, who do you think my Colts are going to take? I have no idea. I don't know who's going to be there. I don't know which quarterback's going number 1 or 2. I don't know. There's a lot of ways this draft can go, and it's real interesting, and it's going to be fun being here live down at the draft tonight, seeing how these players fall, what teams do, who's trading back. We've heard rumors Houston may trade back. Arizona could trade out of the 3. Colts could look to move up. Pittsburgh could look to move up, and there's just so many potential things that could happen this year. And without those for sure solidified leaders at positions, we thought Will Anderson was the leader at edge, and now there's a lot of Tyree Wilson talk. At one point, Jalen Carter was going to drop to the late first round, and now is he going to go in the top 5? Will he be there at 10? It's going to be fun, man. I'm looking forward to getting down there and seeing all the fans and seeing the reactions, because I think there's going to be a lot of surprises in this first round that people do not expect.
Well, I mean, it's like you said, it started at the top. The rumors are Carolina's ownership love Bryce Young, but Frank Reich, the head coach, likes CJ Stroud. I mean, this is probably the best reality show on TV, right? Like, you just don't know, and it's so exciting. I mean, even now rumors are the Titans are going to try to trade up to 3 to get a quarterback ahead of the Colts. I mean, it's wild. Thomas, what do you think about it, man? What's going on in your world? How are you feeling about it?
I'm so super excited. I mean, it's like Rick usually says, like, we don't know anything of what we think we know, right? And this draft is probably just going to exemplify that, because we literally have no idea who's going to go where. And if you're doing like all these mock draft simulations, trying to guess in mock draft contests who's going to go where, like, you're going to be in for a hard time. But I'm going to be super excited to just see where all these players go. I have a couple favorite guys that I hope end up in good spots and stuff, but generally it's just exciting to finally have draft day be upon us.
Well, and you said it, so let's start with it. Who is, and we'll let you go first, who is kind of a favorite guy and a favorite spot for you, Thomas? Like, where are you hoping your favorite guy in the draft goes?
I mean, my favorite guy is Anthony Richardson. Like, he's Cam Newton 2.0, basically. And I just want to see him somewhere, but because he obviously has a way to go before he's probably ready. And I hope he's going to land with the Lions. Like, I would love to see him land with the Lions, even if he falls to 18. I think that would be a great spot, because then he can sit for a year, and he's going to be behind a great O-line and a team that's going to run the ball quite heavily and with some good receivers. So I think that's my favorite landing spot for him.
Yeah, and by then Jamison Williams might actually get to play, so that'd be fun too, right? If it goes at 18, I would be okay with it. If somebody's taking him in the top like 12, 11, I'm like, I mean, Anthony Richardson's one of those guys that it seems like you either love him or hate him. Yeah. Cam Newton 2.0 without any real college production. I mean, didn't do well against Vanderbilt and some of these crappier teams, but then at times looked really good. Rick, how do you feel about Richardson in the first round and to a team that doesn't need a quarterback or that can sit and wait a year? Is that a good thing for you in your mind?
I honestly wouldn't be opposed to Anthony Richardson at number one. We've talked about all these quarterbacks that have been rumored for the first round, right? Even Hendon Hooker has been getting some top 10 hype over the past, 2-3 weeks. They all have question marks. We've heard all the question marks about all of them. Bryce Young's size, now we've got the CJ Stroud cognitive test, whether it's true or not. I mean, he even came out and said, I'm not a test taker. So who knows how well he did on that. Anthony Richardson, obviously not a lot of production in college, but also not a lot of help around him, especially at the wide receiver position. Will Levis, there's been question marks about him, but he's been hyped number one to, possibly falling out of the first in this whole process. So I have no problem with Richardson going first because when you look at the ceiling of all of these, he's got that. And none of them have. I mean, Bryce Young probably has the highest floor, but that size is still real scary. We're seeing that play out with Kyler Murray down there in Arizona. If Bryce Young goes somewhere, you gotta hope they've got an offensive line. He can't go into a Justin Fields situation or a Zach Wilson, even his rookie year situation, or going back to David Carr's situation in Houston. So there's a lot of question marks, and Anthony Richardson can, just with his athleticism, kind of curtail some of those issues, similar to what Fields did in Chicago with that poor offensive line and lack of weapons. So, I understand that there's a lot of risk in regards to Anthony Richardson, but there's a lot of positives with that athleticism, and I think he can throw better than what's been shown. So, I'm with Thomas there. I like him a lot, but he's not my favorite out of all the prospects.
No, I use Mock Draft Database when I'm writing a lot of the articles I do for Draft Countdown, and I just wanted to look over there. They have him right now as the consensus number 11 pick to Tennessee, which is funny because Tennessee is the thought is that Tennessee is going to try to get a QB. All the Malik Willis hype seems to have disappeared in just a year. Ryan Tannehill's there, Malik's there. They do go and get a quarterback. I mean, that would be really intriguing. It almost feels like Ryan Tannehill would have to be a draft weekend trade if they go and get a quarterback, because why do you need a guy like Tannehill there? What do you guys think about some of these things? So I'm going to give you the consensus top 10, and Rick, I'll give it to you first. You let me know what you think about this. So right now it's Bryce Young at 1, Will Anderson at 2, Tyree Wilson at 3, Will Levis at 4, Jalen Carter at 5. Do you think that those 5 players are top 10 guys potentially outside of the quarterback and the edge guy? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Out of the 4 quarterbacks that have been, mocked in the top 10 the most, take Hendon Hooker out, because I do think Hendon Hooker could find his way into the first round. Will Levis is my number 4. So I would not want him at number 2. I've been telling my friends that are Colts fans that I feel like they're overdrafting if they take Levis at number 4 and taking him too high. But again, all these guys have question marks, and I don't know which ones are going to be the best pro. I was more confident in CJ Stroud early in the process, and now that all of them have a lot of question marks for me, I would want Anthony Richardson out of all of these, especially when it comes to a fantasy perspective, because we don't know if any of them are going to be starters in 3 years. So if he goes in the top 15, we know he's going to get the opportunity. It's just how long will it last? And with him, that opportunity is going to be gold for fantasy, whether he's good as an NFL quarterback or not.
And Thomas, how do you feel about, we're talking NFL draft specifically, but how do you feel about these, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10? We've got 2 cornerbacks, Devin Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez. Bijan Robinson is mocked at 8 to Atlanta right now. Paris Johnson to Rick's Bears, and then Nolan Smith has shot way up the draft to number 10 to the Eagles. How do you feel about seeing that type of situation happen in the top 10, if potentially that would happen?
I mean, it feels pretty stock, honestly, because I think that's where we're seeing a lot of people having these players right now. Lately, there's been rumors that Arizona's actually going to go Paris Johnson at 3, if they can't trade out of that pick because Kyler's endorsed him and they've sort of realized they need to protect Kyler, which all the injuries actually proves. So I think that's a valid discussion. Even though it might be a bit high for Paris Johnson. But generally, I think that's where these guys are going to land. Like, I think the cornerbacks are very, very good. And then you have, like, Nolan Smith is the guy who's like, is that a bit too high? But I think I mean, we've heard Lucas Van Ness being sort of mocked to Philly at 10 too. And I think Nolan Smith is a lot in the same mold. And they already have, like, the guy that Nolan Smith is basically a clone of on the roster in Hassan Reddick. So I think they would already know how to use him. And I think Nolan Smith to Philly would be a great fit because he's not used to playing these like 600-700 snaps in a season, because Georgia just doesn't do that. And that's the same as Philly. Like, they like to rotate their players so that they're fresh, and I think Nolan Smith would benefit from that.
It's disgusting. A team that was just in the Super Bowl has 2 first-round picks. I mean, it's just crazy to me to think about something the way that's fallen out.
They're already the best roster in the league. They are the best roster, offense, defense, all the way through, I think, right now, and get 2 first-rounders. Yeah, good front office over there.
Yeah, they've made some good moves. So if you had your choice, Rick, and you were the GM for your team, what are you doing tonight? What's your favorite landing spot for your team at pick 9? Seeing as you're already in the top 10, you almost have the choice of some of these elite players. What do you want?
Thomas and I have talked about this quite a bit already on this show, but I'm seeing the success of I just got a meet and greet with Jaxon Smith-Njigba pop up on a notification from the NFL up on my phone. So I'm going to have to look into that because he's who I'm talking about right now. I want the Bears to find a way to get Jaxon Smith-Njigba. We've seen, Eagles go out and get Jalen Hurts' boy, A.J. Brown. We've seen Arizona go get Kyler Murray's buddy, Marquise Brown. We've seen the Bengals draft Jahmyr Chase for Joe Burrow. We keep seeing these teams bringing in these like perfect matches for their quarterback. And DJ Moore's great. He's going to be great. But we also only have Darnell Mooney and Claypool under contract for 2023. And Justin Fields and Jaxon Smith-Njigba didn't play a lot in games together, but they are like real good friends. They've both said they want to play together. Justin Fields has been advocating for him. That's what I want to happen. If you really want to get the most out of your quarterback and find out if he's the guy, I feel like that's a move that you make. I feel like that Ryan Poles already showed us he found Braxton Jones in the 6th round last year. He's going to be our left tackle. You don't have to stretch for a left tackle in the 1st round. You can look for a right tackle in the 2nd, 3rd round and get your quarterback another weapon. There's never too many weapons, and you don't know where you're going to be a year from now with Mooney and Claypool. If neither of them perform as well with Moore on the team, then you're going to be a wide receiver short anyway. You might as well just go get your guy, his guy, and then worry about stuff next year. We got 2 first-round draft picks next year. If you want to worry about tackle or edge, like, you're going to have cuts after this. There's going to be guys that are tradable after the draft because of who gets taken to different teams. You can address those, and you're not going to fix every hole that the Bears had in one off season. They were picking first for a reason. You're not going to fix them all. You're going to have holes. Go get your guy, his guy, and watch him explode in 2023. That's what I would like to do.
Well, and I don't hate skipping offensive line because they went and got Nate Davis in free agency from Tennessee to play guard. You have Tevin Jenkins. You have, Braxton Jones. I mean, your line is not awful, and you could target a center in day 2 somewhere and get some help there. But I mean, if it isn't defense, then wide receiver makes sense. You have your tight end, you've got a couple of receivers, but you almost nowadays, the way the NFL plays, you can never have too many good receivers. And unfortunately, Chicago hasn't had very many good receivers lately. So I'm with you on it. Why not shoot your shot?
Throw back to that, with the left tackle rumors for the Bears at 9. I like moving back more and going right tackle with somebody like Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. In that situation, I wouldn't be mad at if they moved back. I do think that, if they can move back, they probably will. But I do prefer Jaxon Smith. But there's a lot of things. There's a lot of players there in that area where if the Bears found a way to move around and get one of them, I wouldn't be mad. If they took Witherspoon or Gonzalez at cornerback, I mean, our secondary is already the strength, but you can upgrade over Vildor on the one side. So there's a lot of things that they can do, which is really exciting. But Brad, when we're in Detroit next year for the draft, the Bears have 2 first-round picks. I'm sure I'll have a lot more opinions there and about going different areas, right? Offensive tackle, edge, whatever. But this year it is Jaxon Smith-Njigba for me, and I'm gonna have to learn about this meet and greet and see if I can meet him before they draft him tonight.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. So you're okay with him at 9, right? Because right now I think he's 12.
I think you find the way to do it, and I do think it's dangerous moving back, right? Especially if let's say Stroud goes number 1 to Carolina, it looked like for a while. Let's say that happens, and then Bryce Young goes to Houston, or if it flips, then Houston could be looking at him at 12 for sure. So it's real hard to trade back and then not ruin your opportunity or feel like you're ruining your opportunity to get him. And if that's your goal as the Bears front office, if you love Jaxon Smith-Njigba, I think he's had the most visits with the Bears at the wide receiver position, then you just do it and you eat that. You got, like I said, you got the 2 picks later. You got 4 picks in the top 64 too. I mean, those are good premium picks. You can get good players at other positions with those. So I just think you do it. You make your QB happy, and you watch that offense fly next year.
I mean, if your quarterback's happy, things are going to move well, and if you keep them upright, that's even better. So that's the top half of the draft. To help our friends out in the chat, let's talk about the bottom half of the draft. So we're 30, pick 32, and we know that obviously Miami forfeited a pick, but we've got Philadelphia and we got KC. And Philadelphia is mocked right now, Mozzie Smith from Michigan, and then KC's mocked Will McDonald, edge rusher from Iowa State. Thomas, if you're the champs or the number 2 runner-up, what do you do to make your already strong roster even more strong or stronger? Not great with words. What do you do with it, Thomas?
I think if I'm the Chiefs, to get the question from the chat first, I think I'm going to go tackle. If there are any tackles left that I like at that point, that's where I'm definitely going. I've seen some mock drafts have Darnell Wright fall all the way to back end of the first, and if they can pick him there, I think that's a great pick because Andrew Wiley left in free agency, and that they definitely need someone to shore up that right side of the line. And I mean, Orlando Brown left as well, and then they did sign Jahmyr Taylor, and honestly, we're not entirely sure if he's going to play the left or the right side just yet, and we probably won't know that until camp anyway. But I think they could go tackle. But if not, I think Will McDonald or DK Uzoma, I believe his name is, are 2 of the edge rushers that they should be looking at because they definitely need some help off the edge now that Frank Clark is no longer there. Speaking
of Uzoma, he was down in the at the card show signing autographs yesterday. He's from Kansas State, right?
Yeah.
Am I thinking right? Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. He was down there. Everybody was wearing Kansas State gear, and we were like, "What's going on?" And
that's awesome.
Then I noticed the jerseys had his name on it, so he was down there in the card show signing autographs yesterday.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that some people think could sneak into the back half of the first round. In the consensus mock, he's a second rounder to Pittsburgh, but right at the back end there. And and in this, I use Mock Draft Database for consensus because they pull in all the mocks in all the major communities, and it looks like as of right now, there's a big run on offensive linemen from pick 14 on. So New England, Broderick Jones, the Jets, Darnell Wright, Anton Harrison to Tampa Bay at 19. Osiris Torrance went to Buffalo. I mean, so there's a bit of a run on kind of the higher end guys. The next group down, like John Michael Schmitz's second round, Joe Tippmann second round, but those are all centers. I mean, you don't see another tackle until Matthew Bergeron at 46. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, what's your next need as a team if offensive lineman disappears? Obviously, we don't know. The great thing, I think this may be one of the more interesting drafts for trades because of, we have a couple of elite players at each position, and then it kind of drops in a few places, and then you're just guessing. I mean, tight ends all of a sudden are shooting up. I mean, you've been seeing lately people mocking Dalton Kincaid into the first round to maybe Cincinnati or one of these teams that needs it. It's crazy to me. So, Rick, what are you doing if you're at the back half of the first round with some of these picks? How do you feel about targeting offensive line that late?
Let's first speak on the Chiefs, because I do want to say the one thing that Veach is not going to do is draft for need. He is going to draft the best player that's on their board. That's why I love Ryan Poles. We got him from Kansas City. I was thanking people down wearing Kansas City stuff. I was thanking them for Ryan Poles. Thank you for teaching that man how to GM. I love what he's doing. I appreciate it. And then they say, thanks for passing on Patrick Mahomes. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well,
wasn't our choice.
You guys paid us back a little bit. We're good. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It just this year's so weird, right? Like, take the player you like the most, that you think has the most upside, whatever team it is. If it happens to fit something that's a big need for you, then good. But especially when we're talking about linemen and edge defense, there's a lot more confidence in those players than there are the offensive players not named Bijan Robinson, right? Like, he's the only one that hasn't had a bunch of question marks pop up through this whole process. And I don't think, you could argue that the Chiefs need wide receiver, but you could argue that they're wasting a pick potentially by taking a Quentin Johnston in that area, or a Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers, guys that, have some skill and potential, but just have a lot of question marks for that part of the draft. So if you're not going there, then, filling spots on the offensive line or building depth at the offensive line with guys that you feel more comfortable aren't going to bust is worth a shot. Now, obviously the Chiefs can take shots that other people can't. They've got 2 Super Bowls in the past few years. They've got a good coach that can help guys that may not be fulfilling all of their potential. They've got a lot of benefits that most of our teams do not have, right? So it's kind of like the Patriots from 2000 to 2018 to 20 or whatever, where, other than wide receiver, it seemed like they got stuff out of every guy that they drafted. And Chiefs are kind of like that now, finding Pacheco in the 7th and a lot of the stuff that they've done to build that roster. They're just going to be smart. They're not going to make a bad pick just to fill a need, which is something that Chiefs fans should be excited about with the draft here in town. They've got a maybe, probably a top 3, at least a top 3 GM, and probably the top GM coach duo in the league right now. So they're not going to make bad decisions. That's one thing that I can say. That doesn't mean there won't be a bust, right? CEH, hasn't turned out for what they wanted, but that was also saying, Patrick Mahomes, if this is the guy you want, we're going to get you your guy. And if it doesn't work, then go win us the Super Bowl anyway.
Right.
and then it works out.
Yeah, winning Super Bowls kind of covers up any bad choices, right?
Yeah.
So I would agree. I think you guys kind of nailed on some really good points. And I think more of the league has moved into, we're not drafting necessarily for need. We're drafting based on our board best player. Because when you try to fill needs, that's when you start reaching for guys that just don't necessarily make sense. And your bust potential is so much higher. So I would agree with you guys. I think whatever direction the teams that are first and second, in the league go, you're not, like you already said, Philadelphia's got the best roster. KC always makes very good decisions throughout the draft. So I'm with you guys 100%.
Yeah, both of those teams, I would say, are the 2 teams, and obviously just coming off Super Bowls, but they can literally take shots and reach for guys with huge potential, because even if they don't pan out, they've got the roster to overcome those mistakes. Teams like mine can't do that, right? They gotta go for really good players that they feel are safe. So who knows what any of those teams are thinking and who they have marked as safe bet and risk and high risk and all of that. But yeah, it's good. Man, I think tonight's gonna be so much fun.
It is going
Yeah,
to be
and
a blast.
I think that point brings merit to what we've heard about Texas maybe not taking a quarterback at 2, right? Because
Yep.
there are questions with all these quarterbacks. When you can get someone like Will Anderson, who's like, he's maybe not Nick Bosa, but he's pretty darn good player, and he's probably one of the safest picks in this draft. Like, you can take that guy, and then you're pretty much certain that you're hitting, and that's kind of what they need. Because if they take a quarterback, yes, they do have another pick at 12, but if they take a quarterback and that quarterback doesn't pan out, that could set them back a lot, right? Um, and there's also, I think, merit to the whole building your team around the quarterback, or building your team and then getting the quarterback. Because like, if you only have the quarterback and the rest of your team is pretty bad, like, by the time that your team is going to be somewhat good, you're going to have to pay the quarterback anyway. So I think it's interesting to see what the Texans does, because that's going to dictate so much of what happens in the top 10 of this draft.
Well,
Yeah.
no, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was
No,
just
you're
going to
fine.
say Houston's decision there may tell us right off the bat what the NFL as a whole
Exactly.
is thinking about every quarterback that didn't go number 1.
Well, and when you look at, I mean, you've been seeing, I've seen some graphics here recently of, kind of people's rankings of the top quarterbacks in each conference. And it's like, more often than not, a lot of these teams are still looking for their franchise quarterback. I mean, they're just not that easy to find. So why, if you're picking in the top 5, why reach for a quarterback that you have concerns about when you could get an elite pass rusher like a Will Anderson, even though he may not have, like you said, Bosa size or some of that, but he's arguably one of the safest and one of the best players in the draft. Why reach? I mean, if they're really, I mean, they don't love Davis Mills. Nobody loves Davis Mills. There's some free agent quarterbacks you can go get. If you're really that concerned for a year, go get a Matt Ryan on a cheap deal. And I mean, he's not great, but why reach if you could just get best player and then figure out the rest after that?
If you're Houston and you don't go quarterback in the first round this year, you don't go out and get somebody that you think can win you games. No. You go into the season.
You let Davis Mills keep chucking interceptions.
If you end up with the number 1 pick, you add Caleb Williams to that core that you built in the first round this year. So that's where I think, like, that might be where their head is. Not necessarily purposely tanking, but let's get that edge rusher this year. Let's see what's there. Maybe we get that left tackle at 12, or maybe we get Jaxon, Smith-Njigba at 12. And then if we are that bad with David Mills, then we're going to be in position to look at getting a Caleb Williams or a Drake May, adding that quarterback that we right now feel more comfortable with than these guys that we're picking here at number 2 this year.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. I mean, the 24 quarterback class looks like it has, I think we have the same types of conversations next year where there's some really nice quarterbacks that are coming out that are first-round picks. Not like last year where you got one that might be a first-rounder. So I don't argue that. I'm just, I guess the question I would pose back, so which of these teams, if they don't come out of this weekend with a quarterback, goes and targets like a Trey Lance or whoever San Francisco doesn't want as their starter? Do you see a team that would try to do something like that after this weekend? I'll start with you, Thomas. I'll ask you that question, Thomas. What do you think?
I think maybe the Titans. I've already heard rumors that either they're going to move up or they're going to try to acquire Lance, and I think like they're a team that looks like they're going to have to go basically full rebuild at this point, because like, what do they have left? Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill, and then a cast of, I don't know, has-beens, maybe
aging veterans.
Exactly.
I like that you brought up Derrick Henry. We'll talk about him in a minute.
Yeah. And yeah, he might not even be there, right? That's probably what you want to touch on a bit as well. But like, he's like, we just don't know what the Titans are going to do. They could do anything, and I think that includes trading for Trey Lance. And I think they might even get away with not having to give up the 11th pick for him at this point, because we still don't know what he is. So I think they might even get away with that. Other than that, I think a team that sort of has this sort of bridge quarterback already that has been in the conversation for someone like Hendon Hooker. I think you might sort of be able to take whatever pick you wanted to get Hooker with, and then sort of trade that for Trey Lance, maybe like a Vikings, and then he can sit for, well, you maybe don't want to sit him, but like, I don't know. It's difficult to say, but you just want to have him learn from Kirk Cousins maybe, and then Cousins is gone next season.
What say you, Rick? You're chopping at the bit.
To hit on that point, Vikings already tried that, right? Like they wanted to do that with Kellen Mond, and it didn't work out. So I could definitely see the Vikings in an area like that, trying to get that quarterback of the future on the roster, even if he does sit behind Kirk Cousins. So I agree with that 100%. But Derrick Henry, I just wanted to hit on him because I think he's a guy that could be on the move today. I think that by the time that they come up to draft, he could be in a deal going somewhere. We obviously heard the rumors. We thought he was potentially going to the Eagles already. I think teams are interested, but it's just one of those things that's going to wait for the draft, and then we'll see some chips fall, and that's what's going to be really interesting, right? I read, and not to talk about the Bears too much, but there's rumors that the Commanders could be looking to move Montez Sweat or Chase Young, who they denied a fifth-year option on draft night here, and that the Bears could be a team that's interested in trying to go get one of those edge rushers. So there's a lot of fun, interesting stuff that could pop up tonight. I'm so excited.
Yeah,
it's the year of chaos, man. Like we thought last year was gonna be or was chaotic. Like this year could top it so hard.
Well, I mean, and it's because people are not afraid to trade anymore. I mean, for the longest time, guys, you had to reach a certain amount of value to, the Jimmy Johnson trade chart. Everybody had to meet that number, and you couldn't always. So, I like it. To the next question here, Diana Rossini, I'm going to butcher her name, and I apologize for that. She's reporting that multiple teams are trying to get up to that Cardinals pick to get a quarterback before the Colts. Who would that quarterback be, Rick? Like, if you're going up to 3, I mean, would it be CJ Stroud if Bryce Young really is pick 1?
I mean, we've already talked about it. I have no idea. I really don't. I think that every one of these guys has been picked apart so hard. It's not like we have the Trevor Lawrence in this class, right? Like, there's not that for sure number 1. We thought at one point it was easy and it was going to be Bryce Young, but that's been blown to pieces. So I really don't know. I just think teams, and there are teams that are bad at this, of, they're going to trade an arm and a leg to move up for a guy with a lot of question marks because they're trying to fill that need now instead of waiting back and seeing what happens. Because I think this is also a draft where, where we thought maybe 4 quarterbacks go in the top 5 picks or top, 5-7 picks and ends up being 2, and the other 2 fall to, 15, 16 or something. And there's so many things that could happen. And I think that there are going to be teams that, blow their load trying to move up and really hurt their franchise in the long run.
It'll be fun to see if somebody really does try to get up ahead of the Colts, how much Arizona gets, because they're in a spot where they can say, listen, you want to get up here to get this quarterback. You're not, I mean, it's maybe not paying Jared Goff type values where they traded up to get Goff at number 1 all those years back, but I could see a team have to give up a future first and something this year on top of their first. Like, it's crazy how people are viewing trying to get up into those top 5. But think about a team that made a trade this week, Thomas. So Green Bay moved up 2 spots in that Aaron Rodgers deal. What do you think 2 spots is going to do for them? Are they still moving up 2 spots to grab a tight end? What happens there for them?
I don't really think that they want a tight end. I don't really think that they ever wanted a tight end at 15 because I think the tight end class is very, very deep that they can get one in the second round. I think it's going to be –
You cannot get Michael Mayer in the second round.
You cannot get Michael Mayer in the second round.
You cannot get Michael Mayer in the second round. You can get a tight end in the 7th if you want.
I'm about to say, if you're in a fantasy draft with me, you might not get Michael Mayer in the second round. Sorry,
No, but
Thomas. Go ahead, buddy.
I think there's a stretch of teams from like 10, like 9 basically until like 14, 15ish that could all decide to go for JSN. Like, and we don't really know which one of those teams are going to pull the trigger on them. I've also heard some buzz that some teams really, really love Say Flowers like that early, and I mean it's way too early for me, but that's something to think about. And then like you already mentioned earlier, according to the mock draft, you're looking at like it's sort of the range where the tackle run is as well, and so I think they positioned them in a way that they could go for a plethora of different ways. Like they have so many options now, whereas they might have sort of ended up with the worst of a position like tackle, for example, earlier. Now they can get sort of maybe one of the better ones instead.
It'd be interesting. It almost when they made the move up, my first thought was, I wonder if they trade back now, because if somebody really has a guy they want to target, do they go to Green Bay and offer, because they've got their quarterback. I mean, they believe in Jordan Love. They have a plethora of wide receivers that they drafted last year. Do they really want to target a receiver? I mean, that teen spot, you're targeting the next level of corners, maybe the high-end level of offensive linemen. Like, there's not a lot of things that are happening. I mean, Deonte Banks keeps getting moved up, so is corner on the table for them? Because no, Green Bay struggled getting quality corners opposite Jair Alexander as of late. Rick, what does Green Bay do moving up a couple spots? What do you think about them?
Again, I really have no idea. I don't have much of an idea of what anybody's doing. They, like Thomas said, they could go a bunch of different routes, and it could be. I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Mayer went that high. He can block, and he can be a good receiver, a good safety net for Jordan Love getting his first opportunity to start in the NFL. It could be Jaxon, Smith-Njigba, but I don't see them doing that because, hell, they didn't draft any first-round wide receivers for Aaron Rodgers, so why are they going to do that for Jordan Love?
Just stick it to Rodgers.
They're a team that really has no, like, there's no direction. We thought we knew what they were going to do before, and then they took Jordan Love. It's just... It's I don't predicting these spots is just it's fun, but now that we're here, like I'm kind of over the predicting landing spots thing, because we're gonna find out in a few hours, but I don't even know what else is on the show sheet, Thomas, that you put together, because I didn't get a chance to pull it up, but I'm on my phone, so I can't go back and forth, but I want, what's going to happen for some of these players, these offensive players that are going to be fantasy draft picks here coming up. What are we going to do with those guys that we have a lot of question marks? Because here's my worry, like just from a community as a whole, is that some guys are going to go in the first round because teams are going to reach, or we're looking at 5'9" receivers that don't work out in the NFL historically that end up getting first round draft capital. And then it's like people are going to forget about the history of wide receivers that are that size, right? And those are like the things that are interesting me now, that we're starting to kind of get the idea of where these players kind of fit, even though we don't know where they're going to be drafted or by who. How is that going to impact our rookie drafts and fantasy dynasty leagues going forward? Because I think this year, unlike most years, is a year to trade your first and try to get 2024 first and eliminate some of that risk, because we're looking at some historical stuff that needs to be we need outliers for this stuff, for some of these players that are going to be first round rookie picks to pan out and not bust for us.
Well, and right now, outside of JSN, Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnston are the two receivers that are mocked consistently in the first round. Over on Mock Draft Database, the Chargers are Jordan Addison at 21, and then Quentin Johnston to the Giants at 25. And if you look at our rankings over on RotoHeat.com, I mean, that's kind of where we're at. I mean, we've got Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, and Zay Flowers as those others. And Josh Downs is right behind him. But those are all pretty small guys outside of Quentin Johnston. And even Quentin Johnston originally was the number 2 receiver in the class, but has kind of fallen. Thomas, what do you make of this class of receivers? And are they really worth the first round fantasy draft capital that it could potentially take for them?
Rick and I have been touching on this quite a couple times now, but I think I like outside of JSN and maybe Addison, there's not really any one of these receivers that I really want in the first round. At least not in Superflex. Like you can obviously argue in one QB where you don't have those 4, maybe even 5 quarterbacks that are first round worthy in rookie drafts that you need to take these receivers and take shots on these receivers. But again, like these guys are so small, most of them, and even the guy who should be an alpha in Quentin Johnston doesn't really play like a typical alpha. And Rick is shaking his head because
he looks like a Chargers
so
receiver
out.
to me, though. I've mocked him to the Chargers every time.
He could be a Mike Williams copy, but like
he's more
he
like
just doesn't play like Williams does.
He's more like a league minimum wide receiver 2 years from now after he gets released from whoever drafts him. N'Keal Harry, anybody?
Right.
This guy, I'm sorry, I don't like talking hard shit about an NFL player. Like he's a talented wide receiver, obviously. He's in the draft. He's going to be drafted in the first 2 rounds. But I look at his tape. I don't see anything that excites me. I look at his game logs, and what was it? 48% of his production was in 4 games. He was a dud against a lot of bottom, 20% college passing defenses where he did not light him up. And you're going to get the argument about the quarterback play. But you're talking about an alpha. Even bad quarterbacks in college, especially on good national championship quality teams, get their number 1 receiver going consistently. And we've seen too many duds out of a guy that is going to be drafted highly in the NFL draft. It's scary. We've seen it too many times. Kelvin Benjamin. We've seen Dorial Green-Beckham. We've seen N'Keal Harry. And maybe it's not fair to Quentin Johnston to do that, but I mean, he wasn't a consistent wide receiver 1 at the college level against a subpar schedule of defense. The only defense that was in the top 25% in receiving or pass defense was Michigan in the game against Michigan, where he had 131 yards. But they were the only good defense that he performed really, really well against. The other were Kansas State, who was an average defense, pass defense in college last year. And I can't remember all. I think one was Kansas, one was Kansas State, I think. And
the funniest thing about the Michigan game is he was facing, first and second year corners. I mean, the part of Michigan's defense that was the youngest is the cornerback. So, yeah, he got over well on young guys in a big game. Okay.
But wasn't that also the one where he had a 71-yard catch?
Yeah, he had a pretty big play.
Catch and run touchdown.
Yep.
More than half of his production was on a single play, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I mean, that's which happens. You can't take those away from people, but at the same time, it's if you're that guy, if you're that dude, I want to see consistent production at the college level. We didn't see that out of him. It's not like we saw Jaxon, Smith-Njigba with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and a young Marvin Harrison Jr., who was probably, the 8th best wide receiver in the country that year, but never got to play because 3 of the guys ahead of him were on his
first
team.
rounders.
That's the production you want to see out of a first round wide receiver, I feel like. And it's just scary to me. I'm just glad that he is no longer an option at number 9 for the Chicago Bears.
I mean, that's how I have a 16-team league that I'm in, and I have picked 6 this year, and I'm so not excited about the receivers in that kind of middle of that pack that I traded that pick for Calvin Ridley, Michael Gallup, and a late second this year. I was like, I don't need a pick. Anywhere from pick 6 to pick like 10 is all figured to be receivers. I'm like, I'd rather take a chance on a guy who's aging or coming off of being suspended than one of these guys that I just don't know has really any kind of staying power and ability to be successful in the NFL. I mean,
and that's what I was saying earlier about trading those picks. If you're like, only keep the pick this year in the rookie draft if you are really comfortable about the guy you're going to take. And if you're not, try to trade out. Let somebody else make that pick. Get yourself one of those veterans that are you feel more comfortable about, are going to produce for your team, and don't waste those picks.
It would be interesting to find out, and I'll be interested to see when we do our mock draft Saturday night, how some of these kind of back half of the first round, early second round running backs, how far they shoot up with landing spot. Kendre Miller, Tank Bigsby, Tyjae Spears. Like, it would not surprise me if you start seeing those guys go up higher than some of these receivers with question marks based on landing spots and situations, because they're almost more of a sure bet to return you better value, right? I mean, we know Zach Charbonnet is going to be there in that conversation. He's already a first-round guy in our minds. But, Thomas, how do you feel about maybe reaching for a running back that you like at the beginning of round 2 as opposed to a wide receiver at, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12?
I mean, honestly, for me, it's not even a reach because I already have all of those guys ranked higher in my rookie rankings than a lot of these receivers. Like, I'd rather take these shots. And for a lot of these guys, like especially Kendre Miller that Rick and I like adore, it's like this guy he's like 20 years old. He's still a junior. Like if he was told by his agent or whoever like that the NFL didn't really like him, he would just have stayed in school. So the fact that he's entering the draft sort of just tells us the NFL does at least like him somewhat. And he's had, I believe last time I checked, he's had 10 top 30 visits with 10 different teams on the top 30 visits. So like there's at least some intrigue surrounding someone like Miller. And Tyjae is jumping up boards too. So I think I'd rather take shots on those guys than taking your Jalen Hyatts or your what's his name? Say Flowers.
Yeah. I read a couple of articles on Athletic this week that, I mean, they really knock these Tennessee receivers because of the Tennessee's offense, right? I mean, Tillman, Hyatt. I mean, it makes the receivers look good, but they're not doing a lot of different routes. So there's a lot of development they'll need once they get to the next level. Rick, what about you? What do you think?
Well, just to go off that part, Thomas and I talked about this last week on the show. People knock DK Metcalf for that, and obviously he's got size to make up for the lack of route running. But I think that's just it can be dangerous to completely knock a wide receiver because of the route run. That's something you can teach. Right. You know what I mean? Like, you can't teach speed, you can't teach hands. You can get better at catching, but guys with soft hands typically had that from the beginning. I just think that's a little bit dangerous. I think the size is my biggest concern because, you're a 5'9" receiver that's, getting hand checked by a 6'2" cornerback could potentially have a lot of issues getting open. So I agree with that, but Thomas knows my guy that I feel like is going to fly up boards. Jonathan Mingo. I think that he is going to get drafted higher than anybody thought. I think this is a guy that is different in the sense that he's not going to be a guy that you need to win in a lot of crazy routes. You're just going to look to get it into his hands and watch him do stuff Deebo Samuel style after the catch. He's like a running back after he gets the ball in his hands, and that's what I think is exciting about him. I think that gives you a little bit of a safety net on production. And a little less risk, but it's going to be interesting because I've seen him mocked into the first round of the NFL draft in a few spots. So it's going to be real interesting to see what happens with him. He's somebody that's really been moving up my boards the last probably month. I've been in all the mock drafts, the ADP that we're doing, he might not even have an ADP if it wasn't for me.
Well, and if shameless plug for our shorts, but if you were watching our shorts in January and February, I talked about Tajay and I talked about Mingo as guys that have a lot of value because the position they were in, you didn't get a lot of attention, but they have the size, they've got speed, they've got the physicality you want. I mean, things that some of these high-end receivers in this class or running backs, this class actually, I think people will look back and think the running backs were a lot better than originally anticipated because there's a lot of quality running backs in this class. You know, we haven't talked much about Bigsby and Zach Charbonnet today, but those are guys that, you know, it would not surprise me if we see 5, 6, 7 running backs go on day 2. I mean, second, third round type guys, because the way the NFL uses running backs anymore, there's just so many options and so many opportunities for these guys. And I love this running back class. I have no problem if I'm picking anywhere from 8 to 12, just going, what's my next favorite running back? I'm going to take him instead and see what happens.
Yeah, especially because of the scarcity of the position. So, I mean, I like that. And I think this class is
it's shelf life, I think, too. You know, you think that running back window 4 or 5 years.
Part of it, but I also think that we could see 5 to 7 of these running backs be basically starters next season. Like the running back crop that we have right now in the NFL, and especially in fantasy, they're getting old. In running back terms, obviously, not so much in actual years, but in running back terms, they're sort of getting old. And we've already seen this offseason that some of these running backs that have been re-signed to sort of big deals, that teams are thinking about cutting them because they can save a lot of money. And I think that's going to continue next year as well.
Well, and not only age but productivity. I mean, think of like my Lions, Swift. Everyone's been expecting him to break out for years now, and it ain't happened.
Not everyone. I mean,
well, some people,
just
not
saying,
everyone.
Just saying, don't lump us all in, Brad.
Yeah, some people believe that they're, you know, or the Miles Sanders of the world. Sanders been okay, but not spectacular. I mean, you think about all these guys, and it's like, why not have some of these young, hungry running backs come in and just really kind of take over? I mean, Rick, what do you say about this kind of the running back landscape in fantasy?
See, the only thing that I disagreed with that Thomas said was the scarcity thing. See, I think it's the opposite. I think running backs are easy for NFL teams to find. We just saw Isaiah Pacheco running the ball for the world champions, right?
I meant scarcity in terms of fantasy football. That I think.
Oh well,
there are less good running backs for fantasy football. That's what.
Well, see, I disagree with that too. There's less workhorses, but I don't know that outside of Bijan we have a workhorse in this draft either, right? Like, right. You know, that's just not how the NFL's working right now. Is that there's not a lot of those guys that are going to get the receiving work and the rushing work, but the key for me is just where you get them in the draft. There's been a lot of talk in Chicago about Bijan and at 9, and I'm like, no, just wait, get one of these guys. I don't care which one it is either. If you're gonna draft one, wait till the second, third round, and if you get a Tank Bigsby or a Kendre Miller, whatever, then fine. But like it's hard for me to take one in the first round. We've seen how teams that do that have performed. I mean, Carolina never won with CMC after taking him in the top 10. Giants haven't won taking Saquon in the top 10. It's tough to warrant that for me. But I do agree that this class, there's a lot of intriguing options at the running back position. I mean, even going down to a McIntyre, who I've seen fall to, 4th, 5th round, is interesting to me. And I think that they're another group just because there's a lot of intriguing options that could surprise a little bit with how they fall. Unlike some of the other positions where we're saying it's because of a ton of question marks, I think that is a strength, especially when it comes to fantasy football. And you guys know me, like I'm normally raving about the wide receivers and I'm preferring them over the running backs in rookie drafts, especially if you're in the top half of the rookie draft, or at least the top 3 of a rookie draft. Like running backs get wasted on those teams so often because they're taking them, their team's not ready, they perform, they may help cost them some draft picks placement in future years, but But yeah, I think the running backs are real strong. That's what's been my favorite part of these rookie drafts and mocks. I've been taking a lot more running backs than I normally do, with only a few wide receivers that really, really intrigue me, especially past if you take out JSN and whatnot.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we've talked about running backs, but we haven't even mentioned some of the bigger names that were, 2, 3, 4 months ago. Chase Brown, Sean Tucker. I mean, you mentioned Kenny McIntosh, Israel Abinaconda. I mean, Roshan Johnson and Eric Gray are guys that are getting hyped up a bit more. I know you
I like
talked about
Johnson
Roshan a lot recently as
I like
well. I
him
mean,
too.
there's a lot of running backs in this class. We're like, okay, I could make the case that this guy's productive in fantasy or that guy's. I mean, it's a good year if you need a running back.
Yeah, man, it was like a month and a half ago. Sean Tucker was like the solidified RB3 of this class, and then now I've seen
Bad
him go
pro
like as
days
the
and
eighth running back. So it's
yeah,
interesting.
draft season
So
did
many
not
things
treat
can
him
happen.
well. Yeah.
No.
So, and one other guy I want to mention is a receiver that I think we'll be talking about at the end of the weekend. It's Michael Wilson from Stanford. That guy's you're starting to see him get hyped a little bit in a few different places. I've seen it on multiple places.
A lot of it here. Recently.
And it's like, this is the guy that people in fantasy need to keep their eye on because he's not getting the love and attention because Stanford's offense has pretty much sucked. I mean, it's not been great. It's had trouble moving, but he looks the part. And when you watch the film, he looks like if you get him with an NFL offense, I mean, he could really be productive. I mean, are there guys like that for you, Thomas, that are later and maybe sleeper type guys that we're going to be talking about at the end of this weekend that we aren't right now?
I mean, Michael Wilson's someone we talked about last week, or at least I talked about. So I'm just happy to see that he's sort of finally getting his due. But when I look at the rankings, like Evan Hall is someone I really, really like. The running back that just took the ball to the end zone every time he touched it at the combine. It's just, I like to see that. And then he was very good at the Senior Bowl too, where he was basically like, I think he should have been the MVP, not Jay Kaner. Dwayne McBride is someone I think is very interesting, the running back. And he's had some visits with teams too. But in terms of wide receivers, I think we've sort of covered most of them with Rick loving Mingo, me being on Wilson. But I think the last one is Cedric Tillman, because I sort of he was the Tennessee wide receiver who broke out first, basically, and then Hyatt broke out this season when Tillman was injured and still not 100% when he came back. And Tillman, he is a lot like Mingo and Michael Wilson, where he plays like the alpha. Like he's sort of what you want to see. Like he plays the way that you want Quentin Johnson to play. Like he's the dude who goes up and says, "I'm gonna moss you because this is my ball," which is what we want from Johnston. We just don't see that.
All right. Don't do that to Moss. Don't do that to Moss.
Okay,
come
that's
on
fair.
now. Put some
That's
respect
fair,
on
but
that
you know
name.
what I mean. You know what it's become a verb these days where like you moss someone.
Yeah,
I know
but
it's
let's
not
make
what
sure
Randy
that
Moss
player deserves that
Yeah, that's
Moss
fair.
moniker.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
That is fair.
Yeah,
But
we need a
he
disclaimer.
plays
The
big,
thoughts of
and
Thomas
he's,
Madsen don't cover the entire RotoHeat.com team.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. And another name I want to throw out, I don't know if he'll wind up being the same as some of these other guys we mentioned, but A.T. Perry from Wake Forest, I think, has some really interesting traits that could project to the NFL. He's got the size, decent speed, things like that. But Rick, any other names as we close up the show that are exciting for you that maybe pop?
A.T. Perry was going to be one that I mentioned. There's been a lot of Chicago talk about him in the third round. So he was one. Other than that, it's just tight end, Michael Mayer, and then a gap into everybody else. Let's not get this twisted. I think Mayer is a potential gold jacket type of tight end. Can do everything really well. And I feel like we've got to the point where he had done everything so well for so long that now everybody's just looking for wrong shit with him. We had that period right before the NFL draft with Trevor Lawrence, where there were no knocks on Trevor forever until we got to like this part of the season. And then there was this narrative that there were issues with Trevor Lawrence, and obviously Jacksonville said, "Screw you guys, we're taking him number one," just like we had planned. Everybody had known for the last 4 years since he started getting hyped as a high schooler. So I think that's where we're at with Michael Mayer. I think he dominated the tight end position. He dominated the receiving game for Notre Dame. He can block, he can catch, he can do whatever you need him to do. And all of a sudden, there's all this talk. And I understand maybe there's some good quality tight end talent, but there's no talent in my eyes like Michael Mayer at the tight end position in this draft. And I'm excited to see where he ends up, because I think that he is as good of a tight end prospect as Kyle Pitts is for the NFL, just in different ways, right? Like Kyle Pitts is that real athletic freak that can win like a wide receiver, whereas Mayer is going to be more of the Gronk style tight end, seam routes and blocking and doing the tough stuff as well. So maybe not as fantasy high end as Kyle Pitts, but like overall could end up having the longest career, and Tony Gonzalez, Rob Gronkowski style receiving, maybe not for as long and as good, but like I think he's more of that traditional like legit tight end that we are used to seeing success at the NFL level.
I mean, Michael Mayer stays more healthy, right? Like I've not heard of any injury concerns with him. Where Pitts,
a lot of those guys didn't really have them. I mean, speaking on the other guys that I mentioned, didn't really have those in college either. They're still young, right? Like injury. If they had an injury in college, I'm not marking them as injury prone coming into the NFL. We saw guys like McGee and who had an injury that we didn't think he was ever going to play again, that ended up having some good years in college. Adrian Peterson had a lot of injuries in college and early in his NFL career, and still had a long-ass career at running back, a position that you don't see. So that stuff I try not to pay any attention to. We can't predict that shit, and it's hard. Going into the NFL, you got better training staffs, you got better health, and all that stuff. So I try not to worry about that stuff. But sorry.
That's it. I mean, that's it. So we're here, guys. I mean, it's over. The show is done. Draft night is upon us. Thomas, do you have any final thoughts? I know Rick's had some thoughts here. Anything else you want to add as we close out the show?
Not really. Just enjoy draft night. I know I am going to, even though it's going to be at like 2 p.m. here in Denmark. I'm going to try to stay awake for this stuff, and then we'll see how I do at work tomorrow afterwards.
Poor guy.
I'll try to have fun.
Yeah, right. I mean, it won't be very hard. That's like trying to say the water's wet. I mean, this is what it is. Yeah, it's been a blast.
Find the next guy he's going to get a collection of cards for.
Who's the next Bears player that you're going to be collecting? We'll find out here in a few hours.
Well, it just depends. Depending on what position they are. Most positions are just bad investments if you go with the high-end stuff, because
you mean you don't
quarterbacks are king.
I'm about to say you don't want Prism, Obsidian, Paris Johnson. Is that what you're saying?
I will not be collecting a left tackle. I will say that much. If it's Jaxon Smith-Njigba, I'll go with it. If they did go Bijan Robinson, I'll be there for it. But if it's a defender or anything, I'm not. I'm already over invested in Fields. I was telling a guy down there last night that had a bunch of real high end Mahomes cards. I said I need to start buying some Mahomes to even out my risk that I've got in Justin Fields.
Yeah, it's but it's a fun risk. It's personal collection stuff. It's it's your team, man. So you got to go all in. Go Bears, right?
Well, it's an investment as well. It's not just I don't plan on keeping Justin Fields forever. There's a point where it comes time to where I've already done well. They're already up way more than what I've spent. But there comes a point where it's just like, all right,
cashing out.
We can do something now. I love Justin Fields, but I do love money more.
And with that being said, thank you guys. Enjoy the draft tonight. Get hype, people. It's here. We've got some football to talk about, and What, you got something else?
Well, I'm actually going to be back. I'm going to be back earlier than I thought, so I'm going to join you for the mock drafts on Saturday night as well. Just so you know now.
Nice.
We're going to be back, early Saturday afternoon, so I'll be there for those as well.
Beautiful. So that was what I was going to finish with, folks. Saturday night, after the drafts are said and done, we will be going live with Superflex and 1QB mocks. So we want to see what happens in the draft, how it affects the community as we get ready for rookie drafts, because I don't know about you guys. I've got rookie drafts that are going to start the timer this weekend. I mean, so rookie draft season is upon us, which is an exciting time for us. So make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification icon so you can stay up to date and go live with us when we go live. Rick?
Superflex ADP on RotoHeat.com. And starting next week, we are going to be getting the 1QB rookie, Superflex rookie updated post-draft, startup, Superflex, startup 1QB, mock, ADP up. So make sure you join Discord, Facebook group. Follow us on Twitter. We will be posting when we're doing mock drafts for all that different stuff. Get in there. Help us build that ADP. It's free, and you'll always be able to check it. That's what I wanted to end on there.
We'll be updating our rookie rankings right after the draft.
Yep.
That's it. You guys have a good one. We will talk to you soon. See you.
See you guys.